Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekly Manga Recap. It is June the 19th of 2019. Chris.
Yes. Me.
Yes, you. It has been a weird few weeks for me, but I feel like I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I am ready to talk about some good manga this week. In order to do that, though, first, Chris, I have a very important question for you.
Okay.
How many 90s cartoons that were very obvious ripoffs of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles do you remember?
I feel like I heard of a lot of them, but never watched many. The only obvious ones would probably be Street Sharks,
right,
and then Road Rovers. And Road Rovers wasn't even necessarily a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ripoff. It was kind of a little bit like Power Rangers meets TMNT meets.
Right. It was a parody of the time kind of thing.
It was sort of a weird thing all around itself. But Street Sharks, I think, the only one I watched. But I've heard of like 1,000, like the Biker Mice from Mars.
That was probably the most popular one.
The cow one or something like that. Like
Real Cowboys Moo Mesa.
Yeah, like I'm like, these things I guess existed? I don't know.
Did you ever hear of one called Extreme Dinosaurs?
I think I have heard of it from a very odd source.
From a very odd source.
So I really like the YouTube channel Funhouse.
Okay.
And one of the bits that they do on their show is like they play a game while they wait for it to download. They look up porn of it. So one time they were downloading like a Turok game, so they just typed in Rule 34 dinosaurs, and I remember something like Extreme Dinosaurs kept popping up.
I mean, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a crossover with something. Extreme Dinosaurs was, I think it was on Fox Kids briefly. And I remember it was one of those, like they all did, it had a really weird, whenever you think of, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's got the iconic theme song, but then the ripoffs have like really weird genres of music that they'd go for. Like Street Sharks had like a kind of like jazz theme to it, and Extreme Dinosaurs had this like, it was trying to be rock, but I just remember it being really lame and cheesy sounding. I guess there's not so much you can do when you have to, include lyrics like, that include very clunky words like raptor and extreme dinosaurs, and the course is just, repeating the title over and over again. But yeah. And there was, if I remember correctly, the four heroes were like a T-Rex, a Triceratops, a Stegosaurus, and a pterodactyl, and they were all anthropomorphic. Mm-hmm. Because you gotta go for the popular ones, and the Velociraptors were the bad guys.
What? They're the coolest, though.
That's all I remember. Literally, I could not tell you a single character's name. I could tell you that the T-Rex was the leader.
Oh, yeah. And
the Stegosaurus was the Donatello ripoff. He was the tech guy.
He was the smart one.
Right. That's all I remember about that show.
That's how you do it. You're like, all right, we need to boil it down to like at least 3 characters. We need a leader guy, a smart guy, and like a tough guy. And that's generally like, they're like, you could put more, like maybe a funny guy.
And one of those 3 has to also be the goofy, kid-friendly one. Mm-hmm. So, that was what they did with Real Cowboys. Was there was the serious leader, there was the tough guy, and then there was the goofy guy. So yeah.
Yeah. If you put it
anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about Extreme Dinosaurs, Chris, was because I thought that it would be a much more interesting and positive discussion than talking about Girl Saurus, and they're kind of related in terms of title. So
in as much that they reference dinosaurs.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I thought the dinosaurs would have more to do, by the way, with the premise of this series, considering it's called Girls Saurus. But literally, it's just repeated mentions of girls are scary like dinosaurs, and that's basically it.
More or less, yeah.
And it's a very strained metaphor, I should say.
No, Nick, because when you think about it, they stalk around a lot.
Do they?
Depending, some are carnivores, some are herbivores. And interestingly, I don't know if you knew this, all the dinosaurs and all the girls were both wiped out by meteors, like 50 million years ago, which is why there are no women on this podcast, Nick.
Well, that's shots fired.
It's just proof, Nick.
It's gonna have to like go out and say, like, hey, can you like prove that we're not sexist by periodic podcasts? That's the positive way to address the issue.
But Nick, I haven't allowed women on this podcast because I assumed they were all dead. Is that not the case?
Oh, now we know that women exist.
Oh wow, we really need to change some things.
All right, so airtight alibi. Anyway, so Girls Saurus is the manga recommendation that we took that we're talking about. Honestly, for the most part, got what I was expecting. I think that when I said a few weeks ago that we were going to talk about this, that I just felt like covering something stupid, and it's pretty stupid. It's one of the many, romantic comedy harem kind of series. This one goes for the angle that you see in a lot of others where the guy does not want to be involved with any of the women specifically. There is an odd twist on it, which is the fact that the reason that the main character doesn't want to be involved with all of these different women who all seemingly have different degrees of the hots for him is because he actually is afraid of them. He suffers from gynophobia. Now, you might say, like, okay, well, that could be interesting if a guy is, specifically actually, like, has an irrational fear of these women who are throwing themselves at him. Then you could play off of different things. They could, frighten him in different ways. He could maybe want to bond with women, but he just has this irrational fear of them because he specifically joins this. I'm not sure if it's a boxing club or a wrestling club, some sort of combat club at the school that is all women, and he specifically joins them at the beginning because he wants to basically have enough confidence in himself that he can take care of himself so that he won't be afraid. It's kind of tepid justification, but he ends up joining them because they're all women, and the female manager is like, if you're around these women all the time, then you'll stop being afraid of them. And it's like, I guess that's one way of treating it. Sure. And, he actually wants to get over this fear. He's being proactive. I'm using deliberately very vague terminology. At this point, I want you all to know. We'll get into the reason why in just a minute. So he is trying to get over this fear, but it keeps on getting brought up because these women are actually scary. They're physically intimidating, they're aggressive, and some of them are just plain crazy. Now, the reason why this series is stupid is because, well, the reason why our main hero, Shingo, is afraid of women is because one of the protagonists, Haruka, she had a crush on him. And she confessed to him, and he rejected her. And the reason he rejected her was because she was approximately 4 feet taller, weighed about 300 more pounds, and stripped naked and mauled him while confessing her feelings for him. Why did she do this? It's because it's funny. Fat, naked women are funny. Don't you know?
Nick, it goes beyond that. See, there's a very poignant study within this series about women, their body, and expressing love through vulnerability.
Mhm.
And it's not because she's big. It's because she's too forward with her emotions. And actually, hold on, let me just read the rest of the series. No, it's because she's big and he doesn't like her. And that's the joke.
The thing about Shingo is that the reason why he actually wants to get over his fear of women is because he doesn't want to die a virgin. He has the urges that a teenage male does, where he wants to have a romantic relationship with a woman and sleep with her, and his irrational fear of them is linked to the fact that Haruka stripped naked. So he actually is getting now terrified of tits and boobs and pussy and stuff like that. And he's like, but I want to be able to enjoy those things. And in fact, there are multiple points where this is driven home that the roots of his fear are specifically women's bodies. So when he is around unattractive women, such as Kanayama, whose body is underdeveloped, she has the body of like a 10-year-old, he's not afraid of her because she doesn't have tits and ass. He even accidentally gropes her a couple of times and is completely unaffected because she's not sexually exciting. A woman's worth, Chris, I hope you realize before reading this series, is directly linked to whether or not men find her sexually attractive or not.
It goes even further than he accidentally gropes her. He continues to grope her in like an exploratory, like, this is weird. I feel like I should be sexually attracted to you, but I can't feel a bosom at all. You're like, what the hell is happening here? So this is a unique series in that it finds a way to be everything I hate in manga, all in one complete shell, and does every element really poorly as well. Like, it's a comedy. Take everything else out of here. I'm usually not big on comedy manga, romantic comedy in particular, and this is an extremely bad romantic comedy. It is not funny in the slightest. I cannot think of a single redeeming character. It's a very old style of series where you're like, it just doesn't have, like, I don't know, like the gag punchline timing doesn't seem to exist very well. And there's a lot of times where jokes are just like sexually suggestive and that's the punchline. Like, there's a point where a bully goes to beat up our main character, whose name I don't remember and I don't particularly care, but goes to beat him up. Someone goes to fight him. And the one little, like the girl with the underdeveloped body, whose name I also can't remember, so I'm going to call her Small Girl. Small Girl sees this happening and she has a crush on him. So she's like, I know a way to stop this. So she lifts up her skirt to the attacker. And that's the gag. That's the setup, that's the punchline, that's the delivery. There's no like joke afterwards where like the characters turn to each other and are like, well, that was a fucking weird thing to do. I don't even know what the point was to that. There's nothing along those lines. That's the whole gag in and of a nutshell. And it is essentially the level of comedy you will get throughout the entirety of this series.
Yeah. There So I want to go over just like to explain like the series is like only about 20 chapters long. It had a sequel series which neither of us read all the way through. I skipped around through it, and I think Chris just skipped it entirely. It's all the same stuff. To get into spoilers, Haruka and Shingo end up getting together. But whatever. It's a lot of the same stuff through and through of just Shingo kind of being a dick just all the way through. Like, for a guy that is trying to confront a phobia, he's incredibly unsympathetic because he's so bald-faced about his intentions for wanting to get over his phobia. There's a chapter that is specifically dedicated to him, like he's on a train and all the girls one by one get close to him, and because they're on a train, they get kind of pushed together, and so he gets really freaked out by their bodies being close to him. Slash, in the case of Kanayama, who has an underdeveloped body, which doesn't frighten him, she's just kind of a psychopath. The gag with her is that she is incredibly aggressive and thinks that she can just manipulate Shingo into loving her. Anyway, so he gets terrified and he ends up going over, ends up kind of stumbling into this guy. And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I know. Women are so freaky and stuff, and they're so terrifying." And she goes like, "Oh, you understand me? Yes, I'm just like you. I love the flat chest of a man instead." And then it just like smash cuts to Shingo the next day being like, "I've definitely got to get over my fear of women because that's my only other option is becoming gay." It's like, so you managed to find a way to be homophobic on top of everything else. Like, okay, cool.
So this series came out in the early 2000s, and there's an element where I try not to be like, I'm certainly not going to stand on a soapbox and be like, we've certainly moved on a lot from the age of fat shaming. Because look, I'm the last person. I'd be an enormous hypocrite if I was like, hey, did you have a podcast where the main joke for like 4 years was insulting one of your co-hosts' weight? Look, I understand. These things are there. But even in the early 2000s, this shit was considered, like, when you made, like, the gag of it like that, it was always considered low class and like, shameful. Like, the Jack Black movie, Shallow Hal, is always, like, one people kind of point to as, like, even back in the day, people were like, this is a little tasteless, isn't it?
Oh, and they keep on making the same joke all the time. Like, in case you forgot, this hot girl used to be fat, and that's why Shingo's scared of her. Like...
And there's just
every chapter it seems to come up.
Maybe like if I was like, well, the series is super strong on all these other laurels, maybe I can not overlook it, but I could still like digest and appreciate it for what it is. You can't do that. It's garbage in every way. Like the characters are all, either flat, non-existent, or just boring. Like they're just not amusing in any way. And then there's just moments where you're like, this series is maybe has one of the most unlikable protagonists of all time. Like you brought up that moment. There's another one later where a bully comes up, like a guy from another school, and he's like, I want to see Haruka or whatever her name is. And he fell in love with her. He actually does love her, but he loves her back when she was larger. He doesn't even recognize her now. And there's two things that are annoying about this. One is that they of course had to establish that he has a fat fetish. That's the reason why. It couldn't be anything else.
He's a chubby chaser.
He's like,
yes.
I like fat girls. Fine, whatever. Do you, man. But the thing that's really fucking heinous is that the main character looks to her when this guy announces like, I love her. And he gets jealous and he gets angry. And you're like, dude, you haven't given a fuck about her until someone else expressed interest. And then they go on to literally have a fight with her as a prize at the end. And you're like, I mean, I don't know what you want, man. There's nothing rewarding from this. You do get at least the mild amusement that she beat the shit out of both of them before the fight. So it's not even really a contest. But it's still one of these things where you're just like, I don't know who this is for. It's for somebody, and I hope that person experiences other media than this, because it's a really bad way of looking at almost every aspect involved with this.
Mm-hmm. The series is also really inconsistent in deciding what the relationship between Shingo and Haruka is, because the thing about it is that Shingo doesn't recognize Haruka at first, but Haruka recognizes him, and she resents him because she, put her entire heart out there for him and he rejected her. She doesn't seem to make the connection of, oh, it's because I literally physically assaulted him, and I feel remorse for that. So there's this like love-hate relationship between them that just seems to rebound back and forth depending on what the joke of the chapter is. Sometimes she resents him. Sometimes she loves him, but expresses it through abuse. Sometimes Shingo thinks that she's hot. Sometimes he doesn't understand whether he likes her or not. Sometimes he thinks that she hates him, and so on. It just goes back and forth. there's like one character in the series that isn't completely hateable, which is Sato, the tomboy, because she's just a nice girl, and her entire thing is that like she just wants to hang out with Shingo like bros. And she makes him uncomfortable because she's very like doesn't really care about taking her clothes off and stuff because joke and she's got boobies and that scares him and stuff. But it's like, okay, well, she just wants to hang out and be friends. That's fine.
Mm.
And then like the club advisor is an incredibly vain, narcissistic, psychotic person who is so over the top that it's kind of impossible to hate her. So whatever. Also, she got like probably the one good joke I think of the entire series, which is there's a bit where Shingo is sick at home because the day before each of the girls, through different levels of inadvertent abuse, ended up harming him. And so he's gotten the shit kicked out of him, so he stays home sick the next day from school. And there's a moment where all four of them in a row are reflecting on, it's like, oh, maybe it's because I did this, and or oh, maybe it's because I just, like got pissed off and slapped him and that kind of thing. And they all reflect on that as like, oh, I guess I must be the reason that he's homesick from school. And so Haruka and Kanayama and Sato all at the same time think, I should go visit him at home and make sure that he's doing okay. And Fuso is like, I should go to the mall and get some shopping done today. Dismisses it immediately from her mind. It's like, okay, that's pretty funny. But yeah, when it gets into DX, it gets really weird. At the end, when like Haruka and Shingo are a couple, Kanayama resorts to like trying to bully Haruka into backing off from Shingo. Like she does all of the, like typical Japanese classmate abuse, like, smearing her name, like saying like Haruka's a slut on her desk and shit like that. And it's like, wow, turns out that all these characters are awful. I don't like any of them. And most of the jokes aren't funny. And it's in general just really mean-spirited. If you find this series funny, good for you. But I will say up front, you probably are going to know exactly what kind of series you're getting into from like the first chapter. There you go. This author wrote Bitter Virgin amazingly.
Yeah, that's what's so astonishing to me. It's like, because you think of one relationship series and you're like, we've discussed a lot of really good romance series, and one I keep going back to is Bitter Virgin, and I'm like, it's always struck me so well that I was like, I'm so happy that there's a romance manga out there that ends with the two characters breaking up and it's a natural thing and was still good for both of them. And you're like, how can you have such a healthy view of relationships, at least at the end of that series, and then there's this thing and you're like, there is nothing rewarding to take from it here. I didn't see anything that was particularly good.
I don't know, man. If I remember correctly, hang on, let me look this up real quick. So, Girl Source DX ran through December of 2008, and Bitter Virgin. Bitter Virgin was running at the same time as the sequel series. Like she was writing both of them at the same time. That's weird, man. It's so weird that you have, like a character, like one series where a character has a fear of, the opposite sex in both of them, and then they have such different tones and levels of quality going at the same time. All right.
Sometimes it just be like that, I guess.
That is not how things should be, but they do.
Yeah.
All right.
So to give it a recommendation, I don't. You can avoid it if you really desperately want to find out if this is something you're going to enjoy. As Nick said, read the first chapter, and if in the first chapter you're like, yeah, no, I think I'm good, you are.
Anyway, let's move on. We've got other manga to discuss this week.
We do?
Not quite as many.
Do we do that?
Not quite as many as usual. Yeah, that's what we recap weekly. Manga. Yeah.
All right, I should close all these recipes down, I guess, then.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'll share my banana bread next time, but all right. Recap portion with Manga Recap.
Let's do it.
My Hero Academia, chapter number 232, Meta Abilities and Quirks. So, Twice went up the elevator to confront Redestro to try and save Jiren, and he immediately starts summoning clones. He only summons clones of himself, but each of the clones also summons another member of the League of Villains. So he's got a Shigaraki clone, a Dabi clone, and a Mr. Compress clone. And very interestingly, there is the detail where both Dabi and Mr. Compress are like, what the fuck is going on? Because Twice explains, like, all right, you guys weren't around when I explained that I got over my trauma and am now able to clone myself. So therefore, you guys don't know about that. It's like, huh. So whoever he clones has the mindset as far as he knows that they have it. Interesting. There's also a little bit of dispute among the Twice clones over which one of them is the original. It's none of them.
Well, I do like how they're like, I'm the original. No, I'm the real one. And then one of them's like, shut up. It doesn't matter. We're all linked in our hearts, and that's what matters. And, like,
and then he runs towards Jiren to try and save him, and his head explodes because Redestro kills him.
And then the one's like, I knew that one was a fake.
We don't exactly get an explanation of what Redestro's quirk ability is. It seems to be somewhat similar to one of the quirks that was demonstrated by All for One, because one of his limbs gets really large, and also seems to have the same blackness that his birthmark, or whatever his mask mark thing has on it. It seems to power up his body as it spreads to different parts of it. And he basically almost immediately destroys almost all of the clones with one swipe of this giant hand that he summons. But as one of the Twice clones is starting to fade away, he glomps out another Twice clone. It's like, well, that's very, very... Twice is super powerful. It's one of those things where everyone keeps on saying, like, you don't realize how strong you are. No, he really does not. If he can make a bunch of Dabis that can shoot fire, and he can just summon as many as he wants, the only problem is that he doesn't have very strong control of himself. So,
it's a good way to put a limiter on that sort of power, though.
He would just end up fighting with himself if he summoned too many people. He can also play around a lot with that in terms of like plot devices. He could end up cloning a dead person, for example. So the Twice clone gets really upset when he sees the state that Jiren is in, seeing, oh yeah, his fingers really have been chopped off of his hand. I do like the detail that he's really pissed off that it's the right hand that he would use to smoke his cigarettes, because it's a really personal detail. So the Twice clone starts to get really upset about this, and then Redestro comes in and is like, oh, your little band is not qualified for this. You will crumble in the face of our will. And the Shigaraki clone comes out from nowhere, nearly touches him with his hands. He just like kind of nicks him with one finger. And Redestro is shocked that he's still alive, and then he starts to monologue. We don't really see a whole lot. We get a whole lot of new information. He reiterates the fact that he is Destro's son. He talks about the origins of Destro, which is that, there was this baby that had a meta ability, and his mother defended him from the prejudice that he faced. And her words that, this ability is just a quirk of my child, ended up becoming like a rallying cry for the meta liberation movement and the judgment that was handed down by governments, saying like, okay, we can foster these abilities, and we can govern them, and so on and so forth. Saying this while he's beating the crap out of the Shigaraki clone, and he says that what the governments have done regarding meta abilities, it's only served to suppress them more. It's just, they've changed the label that they've put on that suppression, but they have not actually been fostering it or anything. They have actually been working to restrict the utilization of them. And Destro understood this. and he sought to remake the world so that meta abilities could truly be called quirks. And he says, like, his blood runs through my veins. Does your pitiful gang of thugs with nothing but the urge to destroy carry any of that burden of history that we do? And then the Shigaraki clone is like, well, I'm going to die in a second, so it doesn't matter that you've told me all of this information because none of us are going to remember this. He actually says to the Twice clone that he's going to need to cushion Jiren's fall because I saw him down there out the window a second ago. Get ready because he's going to touch the tower. I know it because that's what I would do. And meanwhile, down on the ground just outside the tower, the real Shigaraki touches the building and the entire thing disintegrates. It's pretty crazy. Redestro survives, which prompts Shigaraki to go, people usually die if they fall from that height, so I guess that you're the boss. Wait a minute, aren't you the guy from those Detnerat commercials? Because, of course, he wasn't there for any of the explanation of who Redestro is, which I do actually really appreciate. This is an odd chapter. It actually, in my mind, despite the fact that it showed off Redestro's ability and how strong he is, made him seem much less intimidating, considering that he goes on this very stereotypical villain monologue that no one is going to appreciate because they're all immediately going to die and forget it. So,
yeah, it's odd. I assume somebody must have talked to him about it, but I'm a little concerned about Horikoshi here. That I assume some lawyer was able to be like, it's different enough, but I'm hesitant to think that there's not going to be something to the fact that Redestro at the very end there is like, oh, you're just spawn an alternate color scheme there. Because it's the exact same fucking pattern. I was like, oh, don't you have to be a little bit more different than that? Like, I get it, he's a businessman, but I do like that he looks cool there. I made the joke on Twitter that I was like, okay, another My Hero villain whose power is, if I touch you, I kill you. We've had a few of those at this point. So I hope that there's a little bit more to it than just like, oh, like obviously there's something there. His limb got super large, but I'll be curious to see if there's more to his power than just like, I get big and hurt you and kill you or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's fine. There's honestly, like, despite the fact this feels like it should be a super significant chapter, it's not one that I had like a ton of investment in. I think I'm more interested. It's weird because I'm kind of getting excited. I'm like, fuck yeah, Shigaraki's here now. And I'm like, he's the bad guy. You shouldn't cheer for him. I'm like, who am I supposed to cheer? I don't know. And suddenly, Vince McMahon in the corner of an office is like, I was right. They're too stupid to handle two villains fighting each other at the same time.
I do appreciate, I think that it's really cool what Shigaraki actually does. Just, I've got to get up onto that building.
It is cool. I'm curious to see, because usually when you have these like big finale kind of fights in a manga, you want them to be like in a like cinematic sort of location. So I wonder if it's going to just take place around the rubble, or if maybe the fight moves somewhere else.
Yeah. Or if we'll just cut to something else, because that's happened a couple of times in this battle.
I imagine so. I feel like there's well, we know that Spinner probably is going to have his fight. And I have to assume Mr. Compressed does something. Currently, the most Mr. Compressed has done in this like arc so far has been become a clone and ask dude questions.
All right. It's the final chapter of Food Wars.
Let's do it, Nick.
Chapter 315, Shokugeki no Soma. That's not the name of the series, that's the name of the chapter. Before we get into this, I do want to say the 2-page color spread of Soma at the beginning, the fact that it mirrors the 2-page color spread in Chapter 1, I think that's a nice touch. And it's a cool little visual that Soma has there. So, it's the final Shokugeki of the blue between Soma and Erina. Soma has presented an evolution of the first dish that he ever had Erina try out. Beginning of this chapter, she tastes it. She has a big ol' orgasm. it's good. There's a page or so of why it's good, and she gets kind of pissed off about how much better it is, and she thinks like, how hard has he trained and practiced in order to make this single dish. And Soma says that I switched a few of this stuff out, and then there's the poached egg, and I changed and arranged the heck out of every bit of it. And Erina actually remembers back during the Hell Camp, which was a little thing that they did before the autumn tournament. The Eggs Benedict thing. That was the first dish that Yukihira saw me make. Well, why'd you make this dish, though? And Soma says, back then I got it together and managed to pass that trial, but in the end you beat the pants off me in terms of plates sold. Ever since I've been studying how you made that dish, and what did you do that made it so much better than mine? How could I tweak it to work with my cooking style? And I did all of it just so that someday I could serve it back to you and make you admit that you think my cooking tastes good. So there's a couple of callbacks that go into this dish, and that's nice. And Mana, who is watching all of this, equates him to, every other chef that she's seen do this to, especially Azami. The more and more that they went through the storm, their confidence crumbled and all their offerings were timid and dispirited. Even Azami was worried over stressing me that he stuck too close to tradition and presented dishes that were delicious, but never more than a 100 out of 100. But this boy... Soma points out, hey, I feel like you're forgetting something. You're forgetting who you should be cooking for. You've been weak-willed all this time, and that's not like you. So just be true to yourself. Who's the person you most want tasting your food right now? And he doesn't say it out loud, but he's thinking, of course, it's your mom. Erina eats some more of the dish, and while she eats it, she concentrates on how much she has missed her mother, how much she has wanted her mother to say, that she enjoys her cooking. In the same way that someone wants Erina to say that for her. And as she eats, the gifting occurs. But instead of people being stripped, the building is stripped. The walls come crumbling down, Chris. Lots of building destruction going on this week in manga.
It's actually maybe my favorite part of the whole chapter, because I love how it's that level of insane stupidity that made Food Wars so enjoyable, where it's like, we've done everything. We've had the entire stadium disrobed because of a gifting twice now. How do we escalate it for the big arena final and moment there? And it's like, the fucking world disrobes for them then. I was like, fuck yeah.
The walls come crumbling around them. The moon shines in from behind Erin as she puts the bowl down after finishing it. Takumi and Megumi are like, that's it, she's done it! She's gonna say it now! She's gonna talk about how great someone's cooking is! And Erin just says, disgusting! And she, slams her hand down and says that was completely unacceptable, or at least it will be once compared to the dish I'm about to make. And Soma gets a happy grin on his face, like, now you're talking. Mana is like, and now I shall deliver the moral of the story. And she says, giving your very best for one person, not just once, but consistently through the years, that may indeed be the path that someday leads to a dish the world has never seen. So, okay. That's not very different from what you were talking about, but all right. And Erina starts to get ready to make her dish for the contest. She's like, hey, why are you smirking? And someone says, no reason. I was just thinking that you're probably going to act the same way no matter how old you get. And Erina gets really pissed off when she hears that. And then says, I would get used to failure if I were you, because try as hard as you like, your cooking will never surpass mine. And someone's like, oh, yeah? Well, you think you're going to get me to give up? I'm not. They're still rivals. But Soma thinks to himself, if it wasn't for you, I never would have made it this far. I needed someone as stubborn and contrary as you to keep pulling me forward. He thinks to himself, Dad, I think finally I've made a dish that I can completely call my own. And we get a final brief montage of all of our favorite characters. Where is Alice?
Except
Um,
Alice. All of our favorite characters, but not Alice. But the other Aldini brother made it in.
yeah, there's it. So we see Megami with the Aldini brothers, Yoshino and not Ryoko, along with Ikumi. Um, Ishiki, uh, Kurokiba and Hayama, Fumio, I guess Dojima and Joichiro, it looks like. And then Asahi with like his bag over his shoulder, like, I'm off to go and be unredeemable somewhere else. And then Erina smiling as she gets ready to make her dish. And Soma says, this ain't over yet. Let's say we get this party started and have ourselves another match. And that's the end. That's the end of the Food Wars. Okay. This chapter in a bottle is all right. It's pretty good, I would say. I feel like this would be much better if there were more coming after this, because it's very much is like, and the adventure continues, kind of feeling to this. It's one of those it feels like a chapter that's at the end of a series that's ended after 18 chapters as opposed to 315. It feels very sudden and weird.
I do like that it doesn't end with a conclusion to the match, because we're able to sit there and say, okay, Soma snapped Erina out of it. I don't know why she was ever out of it to begin with, but whatever. She was out of it. Snapped her out of it, and because of it, she returns to her old fun personality, and she's like, cool, now I'm going to prove to you that I'm better. And we don't get to see which one's better. It's something that we can argue, because it's the top seat of the council versus the dean of the school. So, there's a level where we, the readers, can kind of have discussions going forward as to who we think maybe wins this matchup, and, doesn't have to place like a final stamp on anything. I enjoy it for that. I also enjoy it because we get that moment of someone being like, I finally made a dish that's mine. And although, like, we've been kind of conditioned throughout this series to see everyone as having like a cooking style that is like their stand or their devil fruit or something like that. Someone doesn't really have one besides I make shit into different shit eventually. But you do look at it and you're like, it's reminiscent of the first dish he cooked for Erina. It includes an element that he saw, like it was the first thing he ever saw her make. And it's all filled with an emotion of him caring about her and trying to get her out of this moment. And you're like, yeah, that is distinctly a dish that is very centric to Soma and his personality. And I do really enjoy that. It's not like they were like halfway through the series, like, I don't know, maybe he's really good at like fucking Bohemian cooking or something like that. Like he learns a lot of Jamaican spices. We got to do something for him. So I do like that they did make it pretty unique to him. And in a lot of ways, I like this as a final chapter. You almost kind of just wish there wasn't an entire arc that led to this. You almost wish that we could have just cut everything from the end of the Team Shokugeki to this, and then we'd be like, sure, because you're not missing anything.
Like, tell this story in like 10 chapters or something.
Not even that.
Where Erina is just like, Erina's doing business as usual as the dean. Everyone's doing cool. Her mother shows up to judge a contest, and she gets really, really nervous because of all of her history with her. You go over that in a couple of chapters. She has a contest with Soma as you just kind of like do a montage through the tournament that they've been to get to this point. Because let's be honest, nothing else that happened in the tournament mattered at all. None of the stuff with Tsukasa, with Takumi, Megami, Asahi even was of any consequence. You get to this point where like Erina's confidence is shot because she's got to present a dish to her mother that she thinks is going to be completely hopeless. Soma gets this determination to get her out of her funk, and that's it. You could do that in a much, much shorter time, and it would probably be a lot more effective because there wouldn't be all this filler that doesn't matter. The chapter in itself is not the problem. It's the fact that it comes at the end of this incredibly unsatisfying arc with a very uncompelling villain that basically used a bunch of other characters as sacrificial pawns to make him look more intimidating when he wasn't. Uh, it was a bad time, and this just kind of like a mediocre cap to an arc that's been really, really bad.
There's this moment that I almost want to enjoy, but there's something so annoying about the fact that this whole arc, the whole drama with Erina has been centered around the fact that her mother Mana, was here and had tasted so many dishes that she reached a point where she's like, I need something that goes beyond, and I must, food no longer has value to me. I subsist off of fucking IV drips at this point, and food is mostly disgusting to me now. And only these heights that even a chef who she claims could make dishes that were 100 out of 100 couldn't satisfy her palate. And we have to reach that point, and she's this kind of boogeyman-like figure in the world of gourmet, and this traumatic element that brings out the worst in Erina is there. And then they make this dish, and she's like, I believe I have learned a lesson now. Perhaps waiting, and maybe someone will make something. Like, there's no real lesson she learned. She eats a dish, and she's like, I suppose I've learned everything now. And now, like the wizened sage I am, I shall deposit lessons to you all. And I'm like, fuck off. You're the worst fucking character in this goddamn series. I'll take 1,000 shitty Asahis ruining characters than what this fucking bitch did, showing up and just assassinating Erina's character for 4 fucking arcs, or for 40 fucking chapters, so we could have some fake climax at the end of it where Soma has to wake her up. There is nothing to this shit.
Oh God. So, someone actually remembered that I had said I was going to do this. Some of you have probably seen me that I did this on Twitter. So I can't remember exactly when I said I was going to do this, but I promised that if Megami did not get a standout victory, that I was going to send a message in Japanese to Sakuda Yuto, the author of Shokugeki no Soma, on Twitter. I actually randomly was going through my bookmarks the other day, and I found that, and I was like, all right, I need to send him that. And then, like, the next day, someone said, what, are you going to do that? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I am. So I sent him the message on Twitter, but basically it just reads very straightforwardly, Sakuda Sensei, why did Megami not get a big win? In Japanese. I haven't gotten a reply on it, but I didn't expect to, because, I mean, would you reply to a message like that if someone was like, hey, why don't you do the thing in this book? Like, no. But I'm glad that other people agreed with my sentiment, and were also upset. So,
you know, and maybe one day he will respond to your message, and he's gonna be like, dearest Nicholas.
Ninja X3 Guy says it was just after Megami lost to Momo, which sounds about right, because that was the last important match that she had besides this arc. So,
but Nick, she defeated the guy who used the Chinese.
Shut
spices.
Up. And immediately Asahi was like, "That guy sucked.
That guy was poop.
That wasn't an impressive victory at all.
I could beat you using poop."
Someone replied to me on Twitter saying, like, what isn't the fact that she managed to, find accomplishments and get on the council and stuff, isn't that her big win? I'm like, that's not how shonen works. I'm sorry.
It's also not rewarding. Like,
it doesn't matter that she led a rewarding life when it comes down to a shonen battle series.
What you even say? It's not even. It's that big lesson of like show don't tell. Like, we didn't see her gain happiness. We're like,
right,
cool.
we're just told that she's good now.
Yeah, everyone's like, well, she has a lot of potential. Well, does that potential like equal like a big win at some point? Yeah, I guess at some point it probably does. That's how she's on the council. You're like, do we get to see it? No. Does she get a cool big victory after that? No, but just understand she's really good now. And I'm like, well, then fuck off, man. Don't shit in my mouth and tell me it's ice cream.
I mean, it would be like if I say, like, oh, I'm really good now because, I've got a different colored belt on my gi. It's like, okay, are you any better at fighting? Well, I mean, I'm going to lose all the fights that I have still. so you won't be able to tell.
Look, and people keep bringing up. They're like, well, she also beat this person. She beat this. She beat minor throwaway villains in Shokugekis that were only meant to show off how cool she was. Like, it was meant to be like, hey, look, she's good. But anytime she went up against someone of any level of strength, she lost. And no other character who was supposed to be kind of significant like that has that. You look and you're like, oh, Hayama won the Fall Classic. Aldini beat... Which member of the council did he beat in the Team Shokugekis? I know he lost to Tsukasa. Oh, he beat Aizen.
Izan, yeah.
Didn't he beat someone else?
In the Team Shokugeki? I don't
Yeah.
think so. No.
Huh. For some reason, I thought he beat someone else as well. But, like, he beat significant people there. Kurokiba beat Megumi to get where he was. Like, we saw that there are characters that had these, like, important things, and you're able to kind of, like, build things off of that. But, like, we never saw Megumi have one of those victories. And for a long time, she just lost. So... we were waiting
She did really well, but she lost.
Yeah.
And that didn't change, basically. That's the thing about it, is just it was always the same thing. It's like, oh, she came close, but she lost. It's like, all right, well, she's got to get over that hurdle in order for all this to have a payoff, and that moment never really came.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying about it, is that in the setup that was given, there was no payoff. And that's not satisfying. Mm-hmm. Now, there was no announcement of this in the Shonen Jump version of the chapter, but there was an announcement in like the original magazine that says that there are going to be 3 like epilogue chapters running in Jump Giga. I don't know if we're going to get those on Viz or not, but we will see. I think that those are supposed to be coming out next month. I'm not sure. So... we'll see. And, hey, maybe they'll do a better job of wrapping up the series.
Very possible.
All right. With that done, let's move over to 2 chapters of Eden Zero, Chris.
Is it 2 chapters?
48 and 49.
I didn't read 48.
It doesn't really matter. It's about all the stuff that you would expect happens, honestly.
All right, because I was like, I saw the first page and I was like, oh, it must be like the visual from the fight from before. All right, well, you know what? For the sake of abridging it, I'm just going to talk about chapter 49 because I didn't read 48 and it doesn't look like a ton of
what happens in 48. Zhao Mei says, and I quote, droolity drool at one point.
Okay.
The replica of Valkyrie that Homura beat was actually like an android simulation that was just, I guess, running a simulation program thing. And it doesn't really matter. It's not, whatever. It wasn't the real Valkyrie one way or the other. Anyway, Zhao Mei is like, I'll answer your question. And they're like, where can we find the real Valkyrie? Over here. But she also, as they're leaving, says, I'm going to tell you one more thing because you guys did a really good job of entertaining me. Mother actually exists. In fact, Mother is the person who gave me my Time Oracle powers. And so they're like, oh, okay. And Weiss is like, or rather, Rebecca's like, does that mean you know where Mother is? And she says, no, because also I don't know where Mother is. I'm going to just keep on adding exceptions to my know everything ability as I remember them. She says that in exchange for her powers, I lost my memory of Mother's location as well as my right to that information. So, okay, fine. So they've still got to actually find her. And they say, like, okay. She says, Mother is the parent of the universe, the great sorceress. It is said that there is no wish the Mother cannot grant. Now, this is the one part of the chapter that we need to talk a little bit about, because everyone's like, she can grant any wish. And so, in order, here's what everyone says. Pino says, I want to be human. Aw. Weiss says, I want to be rich. Rebecca says, a famous beekeeper. Happy says, lots of fish.
There you go.
Everyone's dreams suck except for Pino's.
I mean, at least Wiser
There's
wasn't like,
a constant downers. Like, I want to be rich. I want to be a famous beekeeper.
I want to be a big time YouTube celebrity. Like, fuck off, dude. You could probably do that.
They leave, and Jaume's like, I'm gonna go back to being the narrator now.
All right, let's talk about the chapter I did read, though. Chapter 49, Captain Connor. So we start with our characters having flown away, and they need to go to the planet of Sunjewel, which is where Valkyrie is. And they're like, well, we had to take a detour because to travel there, like in a straight path, is like through an asteroid field. It's super dangerous, so we're not going to be able to do that. Basically, the ship can't like instantaneously warp travel anywhere it hasn't been before, which seems like a weird condition for it to have. It's like a fast travel system in a video game where they're like, well, you haven't been there before, you can't go there yet. And they're like, but it exists, right? Like, someone's been there. Isn't it just coordinates? They're like, we didn't put the system memory in for that, so you got to travel there first. Log a point or something first. So they're going to head over there, and as they're sailing along, they look out, and there's a giant school of sea fish, space fish, whatever it is, who are just sailing by, swimming by. It's like an ocean. Space is like an ocean. And they're all kind of commenting like, wow, it's so cool. They're all like really cool looking fish. And someone notices that there's something special inside that school of fish. And they see a guy in a spacesuit holding onto a captain's wheel floating in space. And everyone's like, sounds like he's trying to say something. And then they tune in and he's like, help me. So they pull him on board and he's like, oi, me thank you there, me latties. I know this guy should have like the old sea captain.
Yarr,
but
I need a sea dog.
I want him to be like a stereotypical Irish guy. He's like, oi, I be Captain O'Connor, and I be a ship captain, I be. And he explains, he's like, I'm the ship's captain. My ship went down, and I'm a very good captain, so I refused to give up the helm, even as everything else was destroyed, and I just drifted off into space with the rest of the sea fish. And everyone's like, this is insane. And he sits there, and his stomach starts growling, and he's like, oi, I believe I have reason to suspect me stomach may be growling because me hungry. And everyone's like, fucking yeah, dude. Of course it is. That's what it means. So he's just sitting there, he's eating food. He's like, oh, I didn't know I was in the Sakura cosmos. I'm from the Owl cosmos. That's crazy. And he's like, I'd like to meet the captain of your ship. And which is like, here you go, it's Shiki. And he's like, we never thought that bitches and children would be able to fly a ship so
What is
awkwardly.
Weiss? Chopped liver?
I never thought that bitches and cyborgs could sail a ship as well as they do. And then he stands up and he's like, we'll be taking over captainship of this ship. And everyone's like, no. Obviously, the conversation abruptly ended there with no further follow-up because the next shot we see is of Captain Connor sleeping in bed. And everyone's talking about how they hate this. They're like, we don't like this guy. We don't even really trust him. And it's basically Shiki who's like, I think we should trust him. He's kind of funny, and I like him. There's a whole scene of the girls taking like a bath, talking about how they don't like him. And then Captain Connor shows up, and he's talking about how there's beautiful women in the Sakura cosmos. And he's like, oi, but I'm not trying to come on to you, though. And then they kick him in the face. And we see basically there's just a collage of the things he's doing around the ship. He's like, oi, get me clothes now. I look like a proper captain, me do. Oi, there be a button that says push me, thinks me should push it, I shall. And he also is teaching bad language to Pino. He's like, screw you. She's like, screws for you. He's like, oi, no, you stupid robot. Screw you. And there's just like small little comedy moments there. But again, everyone's like, clearly this guy's evil. And then suddenly there's like this big warning, like alarm going off. And they're like, somebody has changed the ship's destination. Like someone's trying to activate the ship. And they're like, hey, what the fuck are you doing, guys? And he's like, oi, you told me where you were headed. It would take 3 days to get there. But I got you there in 1. And they could see Sunjewel's in front of them. And they're like, how the fuck did you do that? They're like, there was just like the straight path there was full of asteroids. And he's like, I navigated around them. And everyone's like, how are you able to do that? That's insane. What, like, who are you? And he's like, I be the captain. He pulls off his glove and he says, I be the captain of a ship called Eden's One.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's a very cool reveal at the end of the chapter there.
It's a weird chapter.
This is the best chapter that has happened to Eden Zero. I fucking love this character. He strikes every nerve for me in the right way. I just love how fucking stupid he is. Like, just the shot of him, like, his stomach gurgling, he's like, I do think I'd be hungry, I think that way. And then he just goes up and he's like, a button I see. I think we should push it, I shall.
I don't know what the hell the plan for this guy is. It was interesting. And also, I have to say, like, what the fuck kind of security is there on the Eden Zero that he spends an entire day altering the navigation course of their ship, and that takes them until they arrive at the planet for them to actually get into the control room? Like, what were they even doing the entire time? Because he says it takes him a day to do it.
I think the idea is just that he does the shortcut and navigates them there immediately. Like, there still should be time once they realize they're not on that trajectory. Like, you're just supposed to get the idea. It's like, oh, he basically got them there instantaneously by navigating. But, like, ignore the fact that, like, even, like, unless he's doing it at light speed, dodging asteroids, it still would take some time. Whatever. I'm fine with it. It got me to the point where he looks cool, and it's a cool little review of, like, I'm a really good captain. I was worried they were just gonna go for, like, the same angle they do a lot of the time, where it's like, hey, I met this character. Oh, he's evil because he likes peeping on women and shit like that. And like, nah, he's just some goofy old fucking sailor dude. And I love him. If anything bad happens to him, I'm not going to read this series anymore. If they kill Captain Connor, I'm gone.
Anyway, so Admiral Okita is now a part of Eden Zero, so we're good. That's where we're at now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I haven't really settled on whether or not I like this guy, unlike you. So,
I have enough love for the both of us.
I guess. Did you say the boat of us?
Yeah, a little.
Because he's a ship's captain?
Mm-hmm. Dory!
I can't even hate you for that pun now. All right, let's move on to Samurai 8, The Tale of Hachimaru, Chapter 6, Samurai Fate. Samurai of Fate. Whatever.
Look around in the chat saying, I hope his powers to grow really big and get beaten.
This gets hit once. Oh, Chris, all the fun we could have had if Makarov had a weird Irish accent.
I'm big now. Ooh, my one weakness. Somebody hands stronger than me.
Oh, it's time for me to have a heroic sacrifice now it is. Oh, I survived that one too.
Oh, they teleported me away before the bad things could happen. Toy.
Chris, it's time for more explanation of how samurai powers work.
Okay.
This is actually an important one, though, because it's like, this is like the dynamic for how samurais operate and what their like philosophy is supposed to be and stuff. So we'll go through this. Dharma opens up his head and it pops his mechanical spine out in order to use it as a projector to use visuals for Hachimaru, because Hachimaru's stupid, basically. And he says, okay, listen, you are a samurai. That does not mean you are powerful on your own. The three components are samurai, key holder, and princess. When these three become one, the samurai's true power is unlocked. This has been known as the Trinity since the olden days, and Hachimaru wasn't paying attention because when Dharma opened up his skull, to reveal his spine, he got an idea, which was to open and close his face a whole bunch as a joke, which honestly is the most that I have liked Hachimaru in the entire series, because it's like, hey, my face opens up. And he's just goofing around with Hayataro instead of paying attention to Dharma, which gets Dharma really pissed off. And then his head gets stuck, and now he can't close it anymore. Yay. So, the samurai is the key, basically. The thing that ties the key to the key holder is the bone handle that connects them together. There's another invisible connection that is even more important. That between the princess and the samurai. But again, Hachimaru isn't really paying much attention, and Hachimaru's like, "How come I can't get strong without a princess?" And Dharma says, "It's not about getting strong or not. It is only by having someone to protect that a samurai strives to be strong. That is a samurai's heroism." And Hachimaru's like, "I don't get it." And Dharma says,
"Explain it to me."
He says, "Look, okay, but let's train how to use the handle bone." And Hachimaru does the thing that Dharma did in the last chapter, drawing out power from his gut, combining it with the bone handle. But he has trouble getting it up. It just goes, flops over. And Dharma's like, it happens to everyone. That's literally basically what happens. He explains that, this requires training and discipline, and Hachimaru's like, "Why isn't it working?" And Dharma says, "Just because you have a samurai body doesn't mean you are immediately a true samurai." And he says, "Listen, what is your purpose for going through this anyway? Like, why do you want to be a samurai?" And Hachimaru says, "I want to be strong enough that my dad has to admit it, and then I can go outside without worrying about anything." And Dharma's like, "Well, you're already outside." Like, no, without worrying, I said. So Dharma's like, okay, so he is worried about his dad. "But what are you going to do after your father does approve of you?" And he's like, "Well, I'll go travel around space." And Dharma's like, "All right, listen, kid. Over generations, the samurai have protected the galaxy, protected the planets, not to mention the planet's precious." And he's like, "I get it. You protect the princess." Like, listen, just fucking listen to me.
Shut up for a second.
You are a stupid kid. I am an old wise man. Listen to me. "Do you know why samurai protect princesses?" And he's like, "Well, because that's a samurai's heroism." And Dharma says, "One day you will understand," basically.
He's like, "God, I fucking hate kids."
Hachimaru does say, like, "Whoa, so you mean that, like, you protected a princess?" And Dharma's like, "Don't bother asking about my past. You must start by asking who your strength exists for." And Hachimaru basically demonstrates that he is a stupid preteen, shitty kid by saying, like, "I've never met a regular girl, but I don't know who I would protect. But I guess if the princess is beautiful and graceful and smart and honest and cute, I might consider doing it." You stupid kid. But we cut away from there to a ship that this old samurai lord is on. And his princess, who is also old like him, is laughing to herself because she's remembering the day that they first met. And she mentions that a new samurai has been born, and like her samurai, he was born from the dregs of the bottom, which that's why she felt nostalgic. Apparently she has farsight ability, and thus she was able to predict this. She says, "Yeah, it seems like you became a samurai using the crystal one of our young girls lost." And he's like, "What the fuck? God damn it, one of our princesses in training is screwed up." And we see, seemingly, that princess in training as this young black-haired girl who is wearing, traditional kind of, not quite a kimono, but it's the kind of kimono that has like the short sleeves. Very Shrine Maiden-y kind of clothing, yes. And, someone is scolding her for having lost it. Her name is Anne, A-N-N. And they argue over stuff for a bit, and while she's scolding her, and the other girl says, like, with this happening, like, what if the samurai ritual happens without you? What if your fated samurai turns out to be some freak or some evil bad guy or an old man or some wimpy nerd with glasses? But Anne says, "I think it'll be fine. I've got a wide strike, so..." Oh, honey. But she says, "I don't care as long as it's someone who will hear me out to the end. I'll be happy, since, I'm so talkative." Is she? I don't really get that impression. Maybe she's being ironic.
She's super talkative.
We cut back to more of the conversation between Dharma and Hachimaru at the end. Dharma says, "A princess is the one person who can sense the presence of the locker balls buried deep within the planet. The orb that he came out of, basically." It is also known as a planet crystal, and it creates samurai, meaning that ultimately a princess who produces the strength that planet. A princess is who produces the strength that protects the planet. Every princess is bound by an invisible power to a single samurai without fail. Samurai and princess. It is this pairing of fate that creates a hero. And we close on a split panel between Anne and Hachimaru together. So seemingly, this is Hachimaru's fated princess. There's some interesting parts to this. We're kind of still really deep into like, this is how everything works. And Naruto could get in the weeds of that too at times. If it gets past that, I think that it might pay off in terms of like, we'll just fully understand how all this shit works. I don't know how I feel about just I was actually more interested before we saw who Anne was. That's not a knock against her. I just liked that there being there's going to be this future character that Hachimaru was going to meet that is going to be important to him. Here she is! And also the art is kind of really starting to wear on me. Not in terms of the style, but in terms of how goddamn crowded this series feels at times. There is a lot happening on every single page when it's not just an action scene. So,
on one hand, I wish this had kind of been part of the first chapter, because this is the first time that we actually feel like this series has some level of direction to it. Like, it feels like there's some kind of easy to understand narrative that's going to be here. Beyond just like, I don't know, he gets keys from samurais to open a box, and I think something good happens. Like, this is something where I'm like, okay, you're able to kind of understand this now. On the other hand, I'm very glad this isn't maybe this shouldn't have been the chapter it opens with, because this is the most just fucking limp dick boring premise that's out there, man. I don't know, maybe it's ironic because he plays a lot of video games that he has the most fucking paint by numbers video game plot that's out there as like the central narrative to all of this, but I almost lost it when I was like, oh, he has to like fucking find and protect princesses? That's what the fucking narrative of this story is? This is some fucking garbage, man. Why wouldn't you go with something more? Maybe they'll twist it on their head at some point and be like, oh, princess is like an old archaic term. What it really means is just someone who's important to you, you want to protect. Like, it used to be like an old fealty term, but now it could just mean anyone significant for you, like a whole Disney kind of approach. But I'm really worried that at some point it's just going to be like that scene in fucking Return of the King where it's like, no man can kill me. And what's her name fucking pulls the helmet off. She's like, what about a woman? And you're like, all right, man. I mean, you're working off of fucking like 100-year-old novels.
Like the Witch King is just like,
I don't even have gender, I don't think, anymore, so I really wasn't trying to whatever. I'm just gonna soul ghost kill you now. Just being a woman.
Listen, I'm actually really progressive, so I'm just gonna kill you too now.
He's like, hey, I'm equal opportunity. Everyone dies to the soul sword.
Yeah.
I really don't have much to add. Like, it's cool that we have some kind of forward narrative to go with, but like, it's just such a shitty, boring premise that you're like, I don't know how you make a second series and the formula is so much more restrained than what Naruto's even was.
I mean, I like Dharma specifically. I also like some of the idea of the dynamic between a samurai specifically, drawing power from their duty to protect someone, which is very much in line with what historical samurai were supposed to do. What defined a samurai was the fact that they pledged themselves to a lord, and then if they didn't have a lord, then they were instead just a ronin. But it is very much like by the way, this is what we're doing now. So, what these two have a bond now. Why? Because you found the thing that
Like, it's just those things where like, I just don't get why we spent 4 chapters not getting to this point, like faffing around with like a fucking Team Rocket like bandit group and a tank and shit like that, and Nanashi or whatever. Like, one of those things where like,
what if she were the princess?
I'm like, I assumed that like they're gonna come back at some point and we'll see some like relevance to that whole subplot. But I'm like, why did we spend like 3 chapters if we just needed a character to walk up and be like, now listen here there, bucko, here's the story of this world. It involves princess.
Dharma's got to have like a really inappropriate mentor voice. He's gonna be Phil from Hercules.
Oh, what you doing there, Hick?
So you want to be a samurai, kid? Well, whoop-de-doo.
Suck my penis. Like, I don't remember them saying that in Hercules. Like,
getting a little bit of Frank in there.
It's what Danny DeVito would have wanted him to say.
All right. Let's get into the Last Saiyuki. I'm sure that this chapter probably played well with a lot of our fans because it's a very big Estelle chapter, and our viewers love Estelle. It's chapter 15, Wish Upon a Star, Part 2. Estelle's woken up by Koharu after she and Ryunosuke saved her, and Estelle's like, "What happened?" And Koharu's like, "There's no time to explain. I have to go." And we see that she glows at
like, I really thought this was going to lead to like some heroic moment, not you teleporting away. You're like, humanity's doomed. Boop, boop, boop.
And instead of saying like Koharu died on her way back to her home world, just says the end of the Last Saiyuki. And that just ended 3 chapters early. Ryunosuke is fighting the large amalgam Kurori thing. He seems to be doing okay at first, cutting off some tentacles as it approaches him. But he does admit to himself that he's struggling. He can't really attack it. He's got to focus on defense. But he does feel like he's actually handling it well because regenerating those tentacles is using up its strength. So he's like, even if I'm just defending myself, I'm whittling it down. So I think I can do this as long as my physical strength keeps up. And then a Kurori crawls into his ear. He's like, where did this come from? And he realizes it's from when the thing had grabbed Estelle before he was able to save her. So it was probably hanging out on him, waiting for its chance, I guess. So it goes inside of his body. Meanwhile, the large Kurori is still attacking him. So he's like, okay. And he uses his Nyoibo to just plunge a knife into his stomach in order to kill it. And he barfs the dead Kurori up. And he's like, okay, I'm good. I'm okay. Ow. And then he has to fight the large Kurori with this wound in his chest. Hooray! We cut back to Estelle and Koharu. Estelle is like, "You're not good. Why? Don't go over there. What can you do?" And Koharu says, "I mean, I know that I, have fake limbs, but the Kurori can't suck out my life force. I don't have any strength that it can take, physically speaking, and I can at least be a shield for my big brother. So it'll be fine. I'm not afraid. I'm going because I want to." And she floats off to go save Ryunosuke. And Estelle thinks to herself, there goes Ling Ling. Why did I forget? We get more of a flashback. And she thinks to herself, I didn't choose this path because my mother said I should. It wasn't because I had to be like her. It was because I had always wanted to be her. If there ever came a day when my illness was cured and I could move my body. Normally, she was a klutz. She wasn't athletic at all. She wasn't very dependable, but she was very kind. And we get shots of Estelle from the TV show intercut with memories of Koharu as they've been going together through this arc. Koharu demonstrating that she's not afraid to do this, managing to comfort Estelle when she was getting scared. And Estelle thinks to herself, she could be brave if it was for someone else's sake. That was the kind of girl I wanted to become. And she wipes her tears out of her eyes, says, I'm not sick anymore. Now I can run fast. My arms are built up and I can fight now. There's no reason for me to be afraid. And the fear building up inside of her Mo is now completely gone. She stands up and says, now I'm strong, so there's no reason I can't be Ling Ling. She thanks Koharu for being by her side and for showing her the way. I'll be right there. And Ryunosuke nearly gets caught by the large Kurori. Estelle arrives just in the nick of time to smash the tentacles as they come towards him. And she says, I came here because I wanted to, and if it's my own biggest desire, then I can fight against anyone. And Ryosuke's like, all right, but what do we do now? And Estelle's like, I guess we can't win at this rate, so we have to level up. Until now, I could only rely on this outfit, but I'm no longer the weakling I used to be. And she snaps her Nyoibo in half to make it into 2 maces. Dual wielding.
I
This is a
like
cool.
chapter.
Yeah.
I liked what we got from Estelle. This is like, because I've kind of mentioned for a while now, I've been like, yeah, I'm not really digging Last Saiyuki. I haven't been able to reveal. This is the first chapter. I was like, yeah, I'm digging it. Like, I kind of feel like I can get it where it's like, hey, we're going to be a shonen battle series. Like, we are.
Yeah.
But we're going to include some like kind of dark imagery and weird twisted designs and things like that, which is not alien for Shonen Jump series, just alien to how the first chapter treated it in comparison to this. But I still like it. Like, I think it's a really cool moment for Estelle. We have more than one chapter this week that's basically about one girl watching from afar as another one. Like,
And one's
everything
a lot
she wants.
better than the other. This one's good, but
I do like that moment of her being like, I want to be Ling Ling. And then she sees Kohaku run off because even though she knows it's dangerous, what she wants to do. And she thinks to herself, oh, well, there goes Ling Ling. And it's a cool moment. Like, and it's not dropped to us at once. We first found out about the Ling Ling shit like 7 chapters ago. It's been brought up several times since then, but it was a really cool payoff to be able to have her sit there and be like, oh, that's her right there, you know?
well, and besides the Ling Ling connection thing, we've also seen the bond between Estelle and Koharu very subtly growing over these few chapters. And I do like the fact that it's Koharu who is the impetus for this big evolution. Sure, Estelle had the bond she was forming with Ryunosuke, but that's not the big important thing. And it's nice for Koharu to feel like an important character in this series that is actually about her. Like, let's be real. I do like a lot of the stuff that is in this. The only thing I have to say is that, like, even when The Last Saiyuki is good now, it's a good example of a typical Shonen Jump series, as opposed to when it started off, it was a great example of an atypical Shonen Jump series. And I really miss that.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to like just treat it as like, okay, it's a battle series, like, all right, it's gonna be good. It's at certain points it feels like, but I mean, I'll miss the occasional good chapter like this, but I already really miss the series that we could have had. So, yeah. I don't really. We're gonna go quickly through Tokyo Shinobi Squad, Chapter 3, Taiga Shimizu, meeting another member of Jin's crew, Taiga Shimizu. He's their big data guy who does all of their accounting and management and stuff like that. And apparently the scroll that he had was super memorization. That was the scroll that he had. He could remember stuff. So he through a book and then recites a bunch of weird factoids. And then they're like, okay, let's go do the job. We're going to a research center in order to get data retrieved. And they get onto an elevator, and then old Steve Rogers gets on the elevator and is like, before we start, does anyone want to get off? He's there to kill them for some reason. And Taiga, it turns into a Tiger Man. And so he shoots him in the head, but he caught the bullet in his mouth. And then he beats the guy up and nearly sends En flying out of the building. And Jin has to use his ability to pull him back in. And that's the end of the chapter.
I can't wait until next week. We're going to discuss next week's chapter, right, Nick?
I don't really have any desire to.
Aww. I guess that's the end for Tokyo Shinobi Squad, and based off our record, it's going to run and jump for 14 more months.
Years. I swear to God, if this series becomes like the next My Hero Academia level series,
they cancel My Hero for this. They're like, we only need one superhero series. They're like, but it's not really a superhero series. They're like, they're superhero sus. Now get out of here, Horikoshi, you old fucking worthless shit.
Just throw him out on his ass.
You old turd, and take your plans for the next 7 arcs with you, and they throw it into a fire.
Also, we're going to deliberately destroy all evidence that this series ever existed. You won't be able to get the DVDs or the manga ever again. We're gonna go into your house and destroy your issues that you've already got.
We're gonna delete it from your mind, Men in Black style. Like, no.
That's right, Nick. Kyokajiro never existed. Ah! Okay. All right. We've got to discuss then. We never learn. Is that what's next?
Oh, aren't we talking Beast Children?
Well, no, I didn't say I had anything to talk about it.
Oh, okay. I thought
it was a fine. It was a fine chapter this week, but I didn't have any.
Beast Children, Chapter 4, Place for Rugby.
Okay, fine.
Nothing happens. All right. Well, we just had to. Some people go. They're like, are they not talking about it anymore? We gotta put it in there. There's got to be somebody, like the officiator of the podcast.
If something happens, we'll talk about it, okay? If something noteworthy happens, we will talk about it. There
we go.
Or if it starts to, get consistently, interesting and worth talking about, then we'll
play in the next game. It's gonna be
Food Wars is ending. We've got to have another series to talk about. So, Seven Deadly Sins is ending soon. We've got to have another series to talk about.
Now, Nick, we thought that already. Who knows? That could.
The chapter this week is called The Final Battle, Chris.
It just followed the chapters called Epilogue.
It's gonna be like chapter 373, the end, and then it's gonna be like, wait a minute, that was 500 chapters ago. You liar!
You goddamn asshole.
Chapter 423. This is the final chapter. That's an interesting title. Why is it 700 chapters before the end?
All right, let's talk about We Never Learned question 115. The Clockwork Fireflies yearn for the snow flurries of the Pizza Bet Part 2. So we start off in a flashback as a younger Ogata. Doesn't look like she's that much younger, but a younger Ogata is about to start high school and she's praying at the grave of her grandmother, who, in a flashback within a flashback, is asking her to play a game. And her grandmother says, nah, forget it. You've got a ways before you can beat your gran. And Ogata kind of makes the promise that she's like, I'm going to get better at games and I'm going to understand you better. And I'll understand everybody better. And we go in to essentially one of the meetings where it's like, you guys are really bad at these. Kira's like, you can't continue doing this. You guys have to get on the things you're good at again. There's a moment where Fumito walks into a room, and it's astonishing that she succeeds at doing this. She trips, somehow grabs both skirts, and in one swift motion of falling, manages to yank them both down so perfectly that neither girl even has a chance to respond to it. As both skirts fall, they're both still just like in their standing around posture. It's incredible.
Also, she came up from behind them and her hands reached the fronts of their skirts. So I don't know how she managed to hook her fingers in there, but she did it.
It's a true feat, honestly. Maybe that
would be difficult to do on purpose. So
maybe that's Fumito's real talent, the ability to yank skirts down from any angle, even when it seems physically impossible.
Yeah, she needs to give up on astronomy and just go for that and make a career of that.
We see a little bit that Fumito has had a relationship with Ogata because both of them were being tutored at the same time. She asks him, like, hey, why don't you come home with me? It'd be nice to get to know each other a little more. She's like, nah, I have to help out at home. And she's up there kind of learning to herself. Looks like she's studying cards, the card game her grandmother gave her. And then she hears from downstairs, her dad calling, and Fumito's there. And she's like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't too hard to figure out. You smell like udon all the time. And then I found this place.
There is an Ogata udon restaurant here.
Yeah, so it kind of just made sense. And she's like, fuck, I guess she is a genius after all. But there's the whole thing. And then we see like when Fumito was helping out the store. And she notices that Fumito like walks over and is like, hey, the family over there has a bunch of small children, so I bet they're going to want water instead of tea. And that old grandma over there, she looks really old, so I think her teeth might be too like soft to be able to chew. So I think she's going to want like kind of softer noodles. And Ogata's like, how the fuck do you know this? And she's like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just do. There's a boob joke. Doesn't really matter. The whole thing is basically just like Ogata saying, I just don't get people.
Hmm.
And then there's a whole moment which for me is like, oh, hey, sees the board games. It's like, wow, your grandmother must have really loved me. And Ogata's like, I don't know if she did. And she keeps thinking about how every time she tried to ask her grandmother to play a game, her response was like, nah, you got a ways to go before you beat me. And she's like, I don't get it. What was that feeling? Did she like me or did she not? She drew all these games for me, but she wouldn't play with me. And Fumino just abruptly brings up how she's into stars. And she's like, well, I kind of found out something about you, so I wanted to tell you about me and all the stuff I love. And she's like, oh, cool. And she's talking about all these sorts of things. And then she looks out the window. She's like, oh, it's snowing. This is great. And from afar, Ogata...
Wait a minute. No, it's not. We won't see any stars tonight.
That sucks. Fuck you, Snow. Ogata is looking from afar and thinks, ah, I see now. She's the me I want to be, but she's the person I cannot become. She's like, why are you staring at me? And she's like, I don't know. So we go back to the present day, and apparently Ogata has just told all this to Uega, and he's like, so you want to be like her? And she's like, yes, but it's impossible, and that's why I don't like myself. But I've already accepted it, and thanks to you that I'm growing in my own right. Compared to then, I understand people a lot better now. And Fumino walks by and is like, oh, hey, you guys are still out here. And then she starts chastising Uega because she's like, Ogata's out here and her shoulders are kind of exposed. It's really cold. She's going to get chilly. Why aren't you giving her a jacket or something like that? And they have this whole argument. And Ogata is, again, watching from afar. And she's saying, like, she's considerate of me immediately. She understands Naruyuki. And Uega looks really happy with her. They must really trust each other. I feel proud of them. And I think I'm starting to understand people a little bit better. And then she, like, kind of trips in between them. Like, kind of, like, accidentally pushes through them. And she's like...
Well, she very obviously, like, puts herself between them, basically.
Yeah, she does it and says to herself, like, she's thinking, why am I doing this? I don't really get it. Kind of breaks the moment up, and everyone's like, oh, okay, I guess we'll just head our own ways then, and everything like that. And Ogata is walking away, and she's like, so I thought if I understood others better, it would help me like myself better. But all I see are more ugly qualities in myself, and that's why I don't like myself. And then we get the final page, which is just kind of a collage of different scenes, as the narrator says, the next day, from then on, Ogata stopped coming to the study sessions in the library.
This chapter really hit hard for me. It's a weird feeling because it's about something that I don't have a first person reference for, but I know people that have been through things similar to this. I know that it's kind of a thing in a lot of online fandoms to diagnose characters with, forms of being on the spectrum, or to say like, oh, they've got Asperger's syndrome or something like that. And the series has not specifically said if there's anything like that going on with Ogata, but it is quite clear that she's got something going on in her head that a lot of people don't deal with. And that prevents her from understanding the emotions that she feels. And that's why she doesn't understand other people. And that's really, 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 it's sad seeing her go through this and not knowing that a lot of what she's feeling is just, normal teenage girl stuff. She can't relate to people, and she, feels upset when she doesn't get certain things, and she doesn't understand that that's normal, and she doesn't understand that jealousy is a normal thing, and so she thinks that she is awful for feeling them because she doesn't understand how normal they are. It's, whenever I feel emotions like this, I think at least I've always been really good at being able to break it down into, like, this is why I'm feeling this, and this is why that's okay, and it kind of takes the power away from it. Um, Nicole, my girlfriend, suffers from anxiety issues, and she has talked to me about them, and she says that, it's frustrating when you feel something and either you don't know why, or you know that the reason you're feeling it should not upset you as much as it does. And the fact is, humans are not strictly logical creatures, and that's why Ogata doesn't get that, is because she's such a very cold, logical person most of the time, and she doesn't understand her own emotions. And the fact is that just sometimes your brain doesn't want you to be happy. It doesn't matter what conditions you're in. You can be a very successful person. You can have a good family life. You can have people who care about you. You can have a good job. And you can be really, really unhappy just because. And sometimes your brain doesn't want you to be happy. And the only way to deal with it is to physically force your brain to be different. I'm not saying like, oh, if you've got, any form of depression, just immediately resort to taking drugs for it. But sometimes you have to. You should have, an expert help you out with that. Don't say like, oh, the guy on the internet who has the Goofy Manga podcast with his other goofy friend said that I should take drugs to make myself feel better. No, I don't mean that. But also you shouldn't feel ashamed if you have to. And there's a lot that is not being said by this chapter that I think gives it more of a kind of broad parallel in that sense. Like, just I've spent most of the past day thinking about this chapter because I feel really, really bad for Ogata in it. That's basically it.
I like the part where she walked in and pulled their skirts down. It's really funny to me. No, I agree with a lot of the sentiments there, and I really just want to point out that it's like these are the moments when I'm like, this is like I made a joke at the start of this week on Twitter where the skirt pulling scene where I was like, no guys, it's one of the best written manga in Jump right now, and then I posted that immediately upon seeing that scene, and then the chapter that followed is probably one of the most like well written chapters in modern Jump. It's astonishing how good the author is at writing his characters and just driving those points home. Just like the weirdness of like, I don't like these two being close together, and just like forcing herself to kind of trip to separate them.
Yeah,
and then
immediately she doesn't know
like,
why.
Why did I do that?
So she's just like, I must be a bad person.
And and she's like, a whole nuance of like, I just watched Fumino come out here and I want to be more like her, and all she's doing is being considerate of me, and all I did in response was try to tear away something that was making her happy in that moment, and I don't understand it and I hate it. It's an ugly quality about myself. Like, it's just well written, well executed, and it's something that I'm interested in following. And I'll be honest, normally when you get these kinds of like the end of chapter, like the end of like, and they were never seen again or something like that, you usually take it with a grain of salt. But We Never Learn has actually been better than most series at actually kind of like not pulling away from the big decisions it makes. So I'll be curious to see if this actually sticks. Like, maybe I'm sure it's not going to just be like, oh God, it's gone forever, but maybe this does actually shift up the group dynamic a little bit, or maybe she does just not come to studying anymore or something like that.
Yeah. Ogata's been probably one of the most underutilized characters in this series to this point. And it does kind of recontextualize a lot of what she's been through in this, knowing that this is, what's going on in her head the entire time. It really hits hard. And I'm curious to see where this is going to go. And I hope that she gets better and she feels happier, because I really feel bad for her.
Don't worry, Nick. I bet she's going to get her peanuts.
Have you seen Goodwill Hunting? With
no.
With Robin Williams and
no, it's
Matt
one of those
Damon.
ones I need to watch at some point.
There's a scene in it where Robin Williams just says to Matt Damon, just like, "It's not your fault."
Oh
And
yeah,
Matt Damon's like,
I know
yeah, I
that
know.
scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he just says it like over and over and over again. It's like, no, it's not your fault. And until he finally breaks down. And I wanted to like do that with a guy who's like, no, it's okay. It's not your fault that you don't understand this, you know? Oh, yeah. So give her peanuts. Yes. Okay. Let's move on now to Dr. Stone for a much more positive chapter. It is Z equals 109. Great escape. Suika is thinking to herself, she and Ginro are going to make the perfect tag team and get the science lab out of enemy territory. So she heads below deck, sneaks in using her perfect sneak technique of rolling around in her melon rind.
Rolling around at the speed of sound.
It's always worked to this point, so sure, why not? Who am I to question it?
Gotta follow my rainbow. Sonic Adventure 2, Nick.
I know.
Fucking get cultured.
Have to keep moving on. Don't know. Only one way to find out.
Just keep on moving on. That's if Lemmy sings.
No time for guessing. Follow my plan instead. Anyway, there's a truck chasing her now, and yeah.
But she has to run really fast. She's gonna get crushed alive, or it'll just knock her rings out because you know.
Yeah. I'll bet that Suika has that kind of ring protection thing. Anyway, she disguises the science lab thing using the camouflage that's been laid out ahead of time. And they're like, okay, well, where are we gonna? Senku and everyone else are kind of like peanut gallerying stuff because they're like, okay, well, Suika's not going to be able to, do this all by herself. And Kog is like, Ginro comes through when it counts. I believe in you, Ginro. On the deck, Ginro's like, someone else is here to take care of things. I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to leave. And he scrambles off with a goofy expression on his face while saying to himself, ultimate move, not my problem. What a goober.
What a guy.
So he starts to, he gets ready to just dive off the side of the boat while everyone's distracted. But then he's like, he looks back and he sees Kinro on the pile of other petrified people, and he just like, all right, just hefts him up on his back and decides to escape just with him and his petrified carcass. Like, we're getting out of here together, Kinro. At that moment, Suika starts making a bunch of noise by bouncing around, and people are like, what the hell is going on? And Ginro's like, well, why is she doing that? And then he realizes, like, well, she might get caught, and they're going to petrify her. She's going to die. There's no time for me to worry about that. We've got to get away, Kinro, right? And he looks down at Kinro's petrified face, which is going, Ginro. He's a ghost now. But we see that in truth, Ginro is actually thinking to himself while he's petrified, like, I know that you weren't on the ship when that happened, so you might still be alive. But I can't hear a thing. All I see is darkness. I have no way to be sure, but I believe in you. Even here in the dark, I just know it. That is what I'd say to you. Think hard. Think about what you're meant to do right now. And Ginro looks down and is like, even without words, I can tell what you're saying. That super serious face of yours says it all. Sorry, Kinro. Hang in there just a little longer because I'll get you back with Senku to save everyone here for real. And while Suika is distracting people, he gets over to a mechanism to lift up the science lab and starts levering it up so that it will go up above deck. Eventually, they catch the melon rind that's been rolling around. They're like, what is this? Wait a minute. It's just some sort of fruit husk. It's completely empty. And then right beneath them, doors open up leading below deck, and the science lab pops up out of it and drives off the side of the ship. And Suika's driving it. It seems like a bad idea to me. But anyway, she's driving it and gets it away, and it's aquatic and can drive on land, so it just sails over to shore, drives up, and everyone gets into the science lab, Ginro included, and they have made it to safety. Oh, but they're surrounded now by all the people who have chased after it. And they're like, "Oh, is this some sort of weird beast come up here?" And they're like, "Wait a minute. Of course, they don't know that, vehicles can move on their own, so they think it must be some sort of animal. Let's make shit."
Let's make poop.
So they make a bunch of chemicals and shells and stuff together to make something that smells exactly like poop, and they combine it with the fuel that the vehicle is giving off, so that it smells like it's farting and shitting and all sorts of stuff. And they drive off, so everyone just thinks that it's some wild animal that's escaped. And everyone's like, "The escape was a total success!" But I want to draw specific attention to everyone's faces at the end, because all the guys are in the background with bits of poop on sticks being like, "Yay, poop!" And Suika's still driving, which seems like a terrible idea. A, she's like 6. B, she needs glasses to see.
I forgot she does.
And Kohaku and Amaryllis are just like, "Why do you guys have shit on sticks right now?"
I do like that it's like the two characters who were like, fucking idiots.
Fucking boys.
Why are you excited about poop? I don't understand.
So this is a very enjoyable chapter all around.
It really, it's worth addressing that, like, the stuff with Kinro and Ginro is kind of heartbreaking. The moment of him, like, crying as he's, like, lifting his brother's
pathetically
body,
taking his brother's corpse with him,
and he's like, I'm gonna get out with you. Like, it's this brotherly bond that's really sweet to see. Like, that, the entire time Ginro has been kind of a shithead, but he really does care about his brother. And even before he decided, he's like, I'm going to help out the whole team, he was like, I'm going to get out of here with my brother. It's a very sweet moment.
Mm-hmm. Even in his selfishness, he was like, I've got to save my brother. So,
all right.
A good moment for him and a cool chapter all around.
Let's talk about Seven Deadly Sins, chapter 315, The Final Battle. This is going to go super quick because not a lot happens.
It's fight.
Yeah, it's basically a whole big fight. There's a whole moment where the Demon Lord's like, "Oh, you suck," and Melodia's like, "Nope, and when I go, I'm gonna disappear from this world, and I'm gonna save Zeldris." He's like, "Oh, wait, but hold on, you're handled in this scenario." Zeldris, "What about me?" He's like, "I'm gonna kill you."
I fucking love the Emperor's reaction to that, because he's like, "Wait a minute, you want to kill me?"
Hey, rude. Like, my dude, what'd you expect? And then he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have come here with Elizabeth. She's dead weight." He teleports over to her. He's like, "Ha, I've won." She's like, "Fuck you. I'm not dead weight. I'm here to beat you." And she uses some spells to, like, knock him away. We don't see how the whole fight ends because we have to teleport over to, like, the big everyone fight that's going on against Indula or whatever its name is. Yeah, Indula. And it's very strong. And it shoots out a bunch of spores that they're like, "Oh no, if any of these, like, land, it's going to destroy all Britannia, so we got to save ourselves from them." So it's a whole bunch of people, like, fighting and doing stuff. Bond specifically saves King by, like, kicking one of the spores away from him. Or actually, sorry, one of the tails away from him. And then it's basically like someone had a checklist of things they were like, "We need to get this done before the end." And, like, maybe he reached the epilogue. He's like, "Fuck, I never..." So, like, Merlin's like, "Bond, here, use this," and it's like, boom, oh, his sacred weapon or whatever. It's fucking like it's like one of those.
All right, my nunchaku thing.
Yeah, it's one of those 4-pronged staffs, and you're just like, cool, I guess. I kind of forgot that the Seven Deadly Sins all had their own, like, celestial weapon thing, because it really only matters for like 2 of them, but.
Yeah, other than Diane and King and Escanor, it's never really been an important part of the way that they fight. So
I just like that it's just
because like all of King's abilities revolve around Shastafol, and Diane's hammer has been emphasized a lot, and Escanor, well, he stores the sun inside of his axe, and that's it. So.
I just like that it was like, "Bond, use this." He's like, "What the fuck? You just had it this whole time?"
I guess. Let's talk about The Promised Neverland, Chapter 138, Demon Search, Part 1. First of all, at the beginning of this chapter, we see Victor is experimenting with some sort of demon rat thing, feeding it something, which causes it to explode, grow. I don't know, but it it might turn it into like a more monstrous form of itself. Anyway, he says everything is going according to Norman, the boss's plan. The Imperial capital, the evil-blooded. There's nothing to worry about. And then we cut over to Dawn and Gilda, who are with Hayato, and I'm gonna say it as Aishi. That's I feel like that's probably the most likely pronunciation with how it's spelled. Anyway, they're looking around trying to find Sonju and Muchika. At this point, they haven't really found anything. But as they, are, like trying to track stuff, Hayato was really impressed with their tracking abilities. But they mentioned, like, actually, Aishi and her dogs are what's really amazing because, they find everything for us to, actually investigate. They don't overlook any clues that we would have a hard time noticing. And also, they emphasize the fact that, and she's also a really good sharpshooter, too. And Aishi's 5 senses are out of this world, and her sense of smell and hearing inside are all good. And she saves Dawn from a poisonous spider that was sneaking up on him by throwing, like, oh, it's a knife. It just looks like a screwdriver from one angle. Anyway, by just throwing a knife at it and killing it. And so Dawn and Gilda, when they have a little bit of time to themselves, they're like, she's really skilled. She's a good protector, an assassin, and also surveillance agent. We can never let our guard down. We're constantly being watched by her and her dogs. So Gilda's like, I don't know, are we going to be able to protect Sanju and Mujika? And Dawn's like, no. It's how are we going to protect them? We're going to do it. But we just have to figure out a way. And they're also like, okay, well, maybe we can figure out what she's thinking. But she doesn't understand human language, and she only talks to her dogs. So Dawn's like, all right, I'm going to try and be friends with them. That didn't work. All that really comes from that. The next day, Gilda comes across a very odd-looking track. And they're like, okay, well, this seems like a dangerous area because there's probably wild demons nearby. And Aishi's dogs start reacting to something. And Hayato's like, well, this is kind of difficult because you have to search for demons while staying away from them. And a tree isn't really a tree, and it's actually a demon that was holding still. Aishi gets set to shoot it, but Dawn throws a rock at it to provoke it into chasing after him. And they're able to escape from it by splitting up and then reuniting. And Hayato's like, why did you try and handle that in such a dangerous way? I mean, it would have been easier if we had just killed it. And Dawn says, well, it was just one demon. We had good terrain to escape. And if we were to shoot it with bullets, then gunfire could have drawn people to us. We don't want to get attention. And Hayato's like, well, we could have used a bow and arrow. And Dawn's like, I figured if we didn't have to kill it, that was going to be best. Night falls. Hayato goes to collect firewood. Dawn and Gilda have another powwow, and Gilda's like points out, hey, those tracks that we saw earlier, the footsteps were like the horse thing that was with Sanju and Mujika. So maybe we've actually found a clue that'll lead us to them. And Dawn's like, what do we do then? If it turns out to be them, we're going to encounter them, and we've got to make sure that they, don't get killed. And at that moment, Aishi comes up to them and is like, I see. So you two are planning to let the evil-blooded escape. Yes, that's right. I've pretended to be mute this entire time, but I'm actually quite sophisticated and speak very properly. Okay, so, all right. We knew this character for one other chapter, and ooh, twist! They're not how they seem to be.
It wasn't like we were led to believe that they didn't understand human language or anything like that either. Like, this wasn't like a gotcha moment or anything like that. Just like, everyone in the series is very good and very smart. So, like, that's sort of the theme that's always existed. So it's like, okay, I guess it's fun to like. I guess it's fun to jump over and see what Dawn and Gilda are doing, especially while like we're dealing with some pretty crazy high concept stuff over on the other side of the story.
It was an all right chapter on its own, but it really felt like they should have had more establishment of who Aishi was. If this is going to be a big deal, like, what's she gonna do about this situation? Ooh, who is she? That's why so much of this chapter is dedicated to, like, she's so skilled at tracking and shooting and sensing and to building her up in the same chapter that you have this twist in. And it's like, okay, Fine.
Whatever.
Let's close on Black Clover. There's no One Piece.
Yeah, let's talk about Black Clover, page 209. Wish, Asta, and Yuno are super strong. All right, what are our MVPs for the week, Nick? There is literally nothing to talk about this chapter. Asta goes to try to kill the devil and doesn't because it can move its heart. It strikes back. They're okay. And Nero's like, I believe in Asta. That's basically it, man. There's some actions if you can really get into it, but hey, we've been through this road many times. We don't need to go down it again.
It does. There are a couple of things in this chapter that I do like. I like the way that the devil reacts after he's been heavily wounded, because he like a whole bunch of mouths appear all over his body, and they're all saying different, demented things, and then each of them is using power words to cast a whole bunch of spells at once. That's cool and freaky in a couple of ways. And I also like that, okay, if we're gonna go down the road of like, this character believes in Asta immediately, with Sekira, like, okay, it makes sense because she's been there as Nero the entire time, so she's gotten to know Asta. It's like, okay, it does mean something to have that character say that. We know what she has seen of him and why she believes in him. But the fact that so many characters immediately after introduction are like, that Asta kid is really impressive, I believe in him. It's like, okay, that doesn't really mean as much to have that said again, even if this time it is actually legit, like, okay, I buy into that. It'd
be nice if any significant character didn't believe in Asta.
Yeah.
Even the devil believes in Asta. He's specifically
strong.
He's specifically noted that the sword is one of the few things that can take him out, and that the kid is strong. So it's not a surprise when he's really competent at it.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Yeah.
No, it's mostly an action chapter.
Mm. All right. Let's name our favorite series for the week, Chris.
So my favorite chapter this week. I'm going to start this. My MVP for the week is going to be Ogata, but I'm going to give a very strong second hand to Estelle. I really like that moment for Estelle. I thought it was super cool, and I want to give props there.
Mm.
But my chapter of the week, season 0. I thought it was a fucking hysterical chapter. I don't think it's happened yet. I don't know if I've given Eden 0 the chapter of the week before, but I laughed my ass off reading that chapter. I don't know why, but Captain and Connor and me just fucking clicked immediately.
Oh, you're going to be... Why didn't you make me the character of the week then, boyo?
There'd be too many angry people. Ogata has this long fucking dramatic thing about her own like self-worth and the pain she goes through.
Manages to find the courage to fight. Ginro manages to prove that he's not a total waste. It's like, no. Captain Connor was really silly.
Oh my gosh, you don't get it. He talks in like old piratey slang and shit.
He refuses to let go of the wheel of the ship when the ship has completely disintegrated around him.
It's such a stupid notion, but it's insanely cool.
I'm going to go with We Never Learn and Ogata, double whammy. I'm going to be there with you and say, like, Estelle had a really good chapter. Ginra had a really good chapter. But, this chapter, We Never Learn, really, really hit me in the heart. So I'm going to double up on that. So
I want to note that Gray Bob also thought Captain Connor should be the MVP this week.
There you go, Gray Bob. You and Chris.
Yeah, unfortunately, just like that, though, it was a vote against a sea of contrarians, as Last Saiyuki and Estelle were the top ones. They were the audience.
You guys can double up, so can I. So. Before we get into all of the thanks and all of that stuff, do we have a recommendation that we're taking?
We do. Let me just see. Fuck it. This one's been recommended by a billion people. We read something that was just garbage and not particularly good. And at this point, I want to read something that I know is really good. And that is why, everybody, the next time we do an episode, we are continuing the JoJo's Bizarre Pokemon Adventure by going to jail, Nick. We going to Stone Ocean, baby. Woo, woo.
Did you turn to Titus O'Neil there for a second?
I'm going to trip under the ground now. I'm sliding underneath my desk.
All right. That's was going to be for next time. Well, not next, maybe not next week.
Oh, God, no. It takes forever to read that fucking series.
Next week or the week after, we'll probably have a little bit of a Food Wars discussion, just looking back on the series as a whole, as opposed to like, man, this last arc sucked, and how we feel about it. If you would like to watch the show live or listen to it live, we broadcast on smashcast.tv/RoloT and twitch.tv/RoloT Wednesdays. It was Thursdays like a few months ago. Wednesdays around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also follow us on Twitter for updates so you know the exact time that we start. @WMR Podcast is the official podcast account, and your hosts are @RoloT and @NickFTime. You can also check out our past episodes on YouTube, on iTunes, on weeklymangarecap.podbean.com. If you do that, be sure to leave subscribe, comment, rating, all that stuff to help out the algorithms and help us to rise up above the woodworkers before we just go over to the manga and animation section of iTunes. Anyway.
One day.
On our Discord server, you can vote for what you think is the favorite, what you think is the MVP and the best chapter of the week, using the spreadsheet that Ninja X3i has set up for us. That also includes all the recommendations that we have set up, which is very helpful for us. Lets us know how many of you are interested in each given series. And you can also see what series we have covered already to this point. If you want to send into that, edit that, you can also ask us questions on via email, weeklymangarecap@yahoo.com. We would like to extend special thanks to our Patreon supporters, who allows us to create all sorts of fun bonus content for you guys to enjoy. Steve Mann, our tire car artist, you can check out his work in a bunch of different places. Infamous Planet for all sorts of stuff, including helping to coordinate a special thing that we got this week. We'd like to extend special thanks to Milo Stilitz and Wensleydale Cheddar for the opening animation that we have for Weekly Manga Recap. There's a lot of references to ongoing stuff that happens in the show, ongoing running gags. There's a reference to the JoJo's Bizarre Pokemon Adventure in there. It's really good stuff, and it is incredibly flattering that you guys took the time to work together on that and put it together.
It was immensely cool. It even has like what is it? We Are like an influence to that in the theme song that's with it. Mm-hmm. It's extremely cool.
You can check out Milo's stuff on soundcloud.com/Milo-Jack-Stilitz. And Wensleydale Cheddar has got his own YouTube channel, and you can follow him on Twitter @Wensleydale Cheddar. And that's going to do it. So thanks, guys, for joining in, and we will see you all next week.
Indeed.
Yes.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, I was like, what was my favorite iconic catchphrase from late 90s, early 2000s WWE? And I was like, Funakai, and indeed.
That's not with a name. Kaientai. Funaki and Kaientai.
Yeah, Funaki, yeah.
You said Funakai.
Oh, well, I'm dumb, and I'm bad at everything.
How dare you disrespect SmackDown's #1 announcer, Chris?
SmackDown #1 announcer.
He was amazing.
That was a job. He's their Japanese announcer now.
Yeah.
It's super cool. Anyway, bye, guys.